Good evening. I'm Gina Roberts, Voter Education Director for the Citizens Clean Elections Commission. As the state's only nonpartisan voter education agency, Clean Elections is proud to sponsor these debates. Our mission is to ensure that you have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions about the issues that impact your life, and head to the polls with confidence. To make sure your voice is heard, please keep these upcoming deadlines in mind. June 22nd is the voter registration deadline, June 24th, early voting begins, and July 21st is primary election day. A quick reminder, all registered voters, including independents, are eligible to vote in the upcoming primary election. If you're watching this debate live, we want to hear from you. You can submit a question for the candidates at any time using one of the following methods. You can email debates@kc-a.com. You can text 480-769-9511 or phone 480-937-1253. Thank you for joining us and for staying engaged in our democracy. For more resources to help you prepare for the upcoming July 21st primary election, please visit our website at azcleanelections.gov. Enjoy the debate.
Hello and welcome to this Clean Elections event. It is going to be a one-on-one conversation with Republican candidate for state treasurer of Arizona, Catherine Haley. Her opponent, Elijah Norton, declined the opportunity to be part of this conversation. As a reminder, early voting has already started and election day is July 21st. We're going to spend the next half an hour or so in conversation with Catherine Haley about what she wants to do with the state treasurer's office if she were elected. But first, Catherine, we start with your 90-second opening statement. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks to all the viewers who are joining us today and will join us later. It's a real honor to be able to speak with you. I'm an Arizona native. I'm a lifelong conservative. I'm a small business owner, and my life has been dedicated to public service. The work that I have been able to do has impacted millions of lives. I believe I have the qualifications, the maturity, and the integrity to do this job and to do it well on behalf of Arizonans. Frankly, you deserve to have a treasurer who is committed to transparency, who will root out fraud every day, who will safely and wisely invest your dollars, who defends education freedom and makes sure our state pays its bills on time every day, just like you and I are expected to do. You deserve a treasurer who makes sure our schools are funded, our public safety officers are supported, our borders are secure, and our roads are paved. I'm the only candidate in this race who has earned the endorsement of individuals who've done this job, including our current treasurer, Kimberly Yee, and county treasurers and state treasurers who've also done this job, men and women who understand what is required. As president of the State Board of Education, I interact with our state treasurer, and during our conversations about the candidates in this race, I came to the conclusion that Arizona's need a voter and Arizonans need and voters deserve someone who understands this job and frankly has the experience managing public and private dollars, something that I do have and my opponents do not. And so I hope today, through our conversation, Steve, to earn our voters' support and to join us in this movement.
Catherine, thanks very much. I think it's a good time coming out of your opening statement to ask for a little bit more about your background and why you think it's a fit for this particular position.
Well, I always appreciate the question. My background's an interesting one. I think for many of us that sort of you have your 30-year life planned out for you. I was pre-med in college, and my intent was to go to medical school and practice. Instead, I did research, but eventually found my way to Capitol Hill. And initially, it was going to be a short stint, but it ended up being 13 years on working on Capitol Hill for members of our U.S. House and U.S. Senate, including 7 working for the Speaker of the House, John Boehner. And that was during those years, from 2009 to 2015, we were working hard to combat the Obama agenda. The Obama administration was working very hard to get in different details of our lives, whether it was education, workforce, healthcare, energy, you name it, it was involved. And it was an extraordinary opportunity. But when my boss retired, I began to think about what was next and how did I want to use my experience of understanding how government works, how to build coalitions to advance public policy, how to understand how policy impacts individuals back in their home districts and communities. And so I went and worked in philanthropy. I earned the trust of individuals who were investing in local communities all across the United States, helping to launch new education initiatives, workforce readiness, so individuals could pursue meaningful work. And again, it was an extraordinary experience to work alongside those innovators, help ensure that they were able to track that philanthropic investment, and frankly, earn that trust from donors who could then invest in their local communities. And it was from those two experiences that when I moved home in 2021, that I launched a consulting firm. My firm, we have worked with over 60 organizations all across the United States, helping to ensure that they have the leadership, the governance structure to attract long-term investment from individuals. And that has been an extraordinary experience as well. And one little more thing that hopefully your voters and our listeners will find interesting, I serve as president of the State Board of Education, where I am putting policy in action. We have fiscal oversight of our public schools, which I think is very relevant to what we do in the Treasurer's Office, and as well the oversight of the ESA program. So making sure that dollars are accounted for, and when there's mismanagement, families are paying those funds back to Arizona taxpayers. Each of those experiences and policy and philanthropy as a small business owner and overseeing public and private funds, I believe has prepared me for this new opportunity.
Catherine, we're not here to have you do an explainer for us, but I feel like state treasurer is one of those positions. I mean, I'll briefly compare it to corporation commission. Really important position. I'm not sure the average voter necessarily understands. So from your standpoint, what does the state treasurer, what are the most important responsibilities of the state treasurer's office? And in addition to your background, what about your style of leadership? What about your temperament do you think would make you a good fit for how the office is supposed to work?
Sure. So for those that are unfamiliar, I get all kinds of questions like, do you take revenue from the state? The Treasurer's Office is not the Department of Revenue. It does not collect taxes. It does collect the deposits from the Department of Revenue. But you, as the Treasurer, are the Chief Banking and Investment Officer. You are the steward of our taxpayer funds. And you must do three things. You must always ensure that we are protecting the principal. We are protecting the taxpayer funds. Why? So that we are readily able to pay our bills. You always are balancing liquidity. And so whether it's our county treasurers, which I'm grateful for the endorsement of 6 of our current treasurers and 1 former county treasurer, individuals, they have to take those funds so they can deploy it out to local communities and pay those bills. And then it's about yield. So that's sort of the basic philosophy, maintaining our state investments. But there's several other things. The treasurer chairs the State Board of Investments, where she is able to appoint 2 individuals from the public and one individual from the public and 1 county treasurer. You also have representatives from the gubernatorial branch, the Department of Investment and Insurance, and 1 from Department of Revenue. So you're setting that North Star, but you're also getting input from other experts. You're also managing a team. And under the Treasurer's Office, not only are you managing the state funds, you're also managing 2 other important funds. One is the Permanent Land Endowment Trust Fund, and I suspect we'll talk about that. The PLEDF is the entity where when we sell our state lands, that revenue goes into the PLEDF, or the Public Land Endowment Trust Fund, and is deployed to 13 different entities, but over 90% funds public education. And then last but not least, you also are helping to steward the local government investment pools. This is where our county treasurers, local taxing authorities, community colleges, and other entities are able to invest alongside the Treasurer's Office. But again, all of it is around protecting the principal and ensuring liquidity so our communities can ultimately pay their bills on time when they need to pay them.
Well, you jumped the gun. I mean, I'm glad you did. Let's talk a little bit about investment in public education. Certainly, the legislature, the governor have been discussing Proposition 123, whether to extend it. Came about during Governor Doug Ducey's time in office. What can the Treasurer's Office do in relation to education funding? Are there certain things that Treasurer Yee has done that you are a fan of? Are there certain things you might modify slightly or want to continue in the same path were you to win this office?
Well, I think she's done a fantastic job. The rate of return that she has gotten, she's averaging around 10.1%, I believe, on the rate of return for the Public Land Endowment Trust Fund. It's currently valued over $10.1 billion. And in her tenure, it has doubled. Some of that is because of the sale of public lands. So the sale of that goes into the PLETF, but also she's gotten a really good rate of return. The interesting thing about Prop 123, that was in response to a legal case, as you and your listeners, our listeners today might be familiar with. Arizona, coming out of 2008 crisis, we were having a really difficult time as a state paying our bills. Our real estate development came to a standstill. Individuals were foreclosing on their homes. It was a really difficult time for our state. And as a result of that, there were several instances. We had a proposition in 2012 that directed 2.2% of the PLETF to go directly to the classroom site fund, so funds directly to the classroom. And then you had Prop 123, which then added an additional 4.4% to the existing requirement. I think all of that has been good, but something that I think is important for your listeners to understand, the purpose of the PLETF is that before statehood, Arizona was given more than 10 million acres of land for the purpose of selling so that we had resources that would help support various goods and services, but primarily education. But what that is, it's an endowment. An endowment is to exist for today, but also into the future. So if you are required to pay out higher than what is necessary, that means it might eat into the principal, the corpus of the endowment. And so I am a little cautious. I do think a 5% payout is a good thing. That is sort of the standard when you think of foundations and endowments. But I look forward to, if I have the honor and privilege of serving as Arizona's next treasurer, working with the legislature to figure out the best solution for Arizona families and students in our education system.
Let's talk about general investment philosophy, I suppose, because it's one thing for those of us to, balance a budget on our own. It's one thing to say, wow, I want to buy stock in that company, or I want to do such and such. At the level that the state treasurer does it, how conservative, I don't mean politically, but how conservative do you think someone in that office should be in terms of the way that things are invested, the way that, again, sort of the office is run? Because there are some who've said, in fact, I believe your opponent in the Republican primary has said, well, we're, in essence, without saying it verbatim, we're leaving a lot of money on the table. Look at all these other billions that Arizona could be making. When it comes to these kinds of investments, aren't we talking about people who invest in the state retirement system? We're talking about people who really have been involved in the state for a long time. So how do you see the approach that the treasurer should be taking? And frankly, what can the treasurer do when it comes to investments? Are there guardrails so the treasurer can only do so much to make sure that we're not taking potentially unnecessary chances?
Yeah, I think I really appreciate the question. I think for those that have criticized Treasurer Yee, she has doubled our state assets from approximately $15 billion when she took office in 2019 to now more than $32 billion. Yes, we've had individuals that have moved into the state, but not every single person moving into the state are paying taxes. So I just want folks to take that into consideration. And I should also note we have been very conservative. Our governors have been quite conservative in the sale of public land. So that too it's contributed, but not significantly as we've seen in other states. But I believe a conservative approach is really necessary. Why? Because as all of us know, when you are investing taxpayer dollars, it's not your funds. It's not your private retirement investment strategy where you can make big, bold risks when you're 20 or 30 years old, planning for when you're 70. You need to be able to invest so that individuals can take those resources out as they need them. That's the thing that I think individuals forget. And anytime you're taking on an additional 1%, that means an additional risk. we are putting our taxpayer funds at. We do have to, it's a mix of investments. We do have to have investments in the good faith and credit of our federal government. And then we are also able to invest in equities, so stocks and bonds. And my investment philosophy is I believe that we should not be investing in the alphabet soup of woke ideology. We should not be investing in DEI, BDS, ESG, but we should be really focused on companies that align with Arizona values and ultimately will give us a good return, and that are really focused on that return on investment. And so my one other thing that I would like to note that is probably different than my Republican opponent is the current practice for the local government investment pool is to be done in-house. And for those that might not know, we have a team of investors, certified investors and accountants that are part of that team. And that investment strategy is done in-house. We are not contracting out with the highest bidder that is going to do what he or she thinks is in the best interest of Arizona. It's done in-house. There was a piece of policy that was introduced by Representative Livingston that would codify that practice, that would only in the instance of that the Treasurer's Office is unable to invest on behalf of Arizona taxpayers, that you would then contract out. And I believe that that is the best strategy to ensure that we are maintaining the best approach on behalf of Arizona families, Arizona taxpayers, and ultimately get the best return that align with our values. So I think I take a conservative approach because it's not my dollars, it's our taxpayer funds, and we need to steward those responsibly and well.
So do you think your Republican opponent has been somewhat irresponsible in acting as though the state treasurer is sort of the lead investor as opposed to having a team, as you're talking about, of professional investors involved in who the treasurer is managing?
Well, I do think that's interesting, and I appreciate the question, Steve. The treasurer is not the chief stock picker. If that's the case, then I would invite my opponent to join me on the team and to help me pick those stocks. But at the end of the day, it's about managing a team. You have a team of about 38 individuals. Many of those are investors, excellent individuals that have served our state and served our state nobly. And then you're also making sure that you are providing services to our communities. Individuals have sort of criticized our counties and municipalities that are not investing alongside the local government investment pool. It might not be the best investment strategy, but I believe that the role of the treasurer is coming alongside our local counties and our communities and helping ensure that they have the support they need to actually invest alongside or invest accordingly and meet the demands of their local communities. It's really, really important. And I believe that that is something that I can do as Arizona's next treasurer to support our community so that they too can be held accountable and do the best they can on behalf of those that have elected them and helping to manage their fiduciary responsibility.
Interesting. So I'm wondering, you're president of the State Board of Education. How has that experience affected, you mentioned a bit in your opening statement, how has that affected your ability, do you think, to manage state treasurer's office if you were to win? Has it given you more, I mean, you worked in federal government, but has it given you a little bit more experience in terms of state government and how you think it works most effectively?
Yeah, I think, there's been a lot of conversation about what is the role and responsibility of the treasurer's office. And the treasurer's office is not an auditor. It does not have an auditing function. That is the role of the Auditor General's office, which is actually a tool of the legislature. So the Auditor General has a direct responsibility of making sure that not only policies are being carried out, but funds are being appropriated and used accordingly. And I see that because of that experience and our interaction with the Auditor General, we just had an audit of the A through F accountability system alongside the Department of Education. And frankly, under our leadership, we are moving in a direction that actually aligned with some of the recommendations that the A through F or the Auditor General described. But where I see a unique opportunity, and I think this has happened under our current treasurer, is the Auditor General is responsible for overseeing how our school districts are accounting their public dollars. And when there are irregularities, it comes before the State Board of Education, and we direct those schools to corrective action. So sometimes it's withholding 3% of those funds to help. It's a stick. It can be painful. But the goal is we need you as a local school district to get back on track. If there's gross mismanagement, then we will put them in receivership. We did that last year with the Isaac School District. And I see that experience working together with the Auditor General's office is really, really important. But I should also note that the role of the treasurer does not have deep insight into how the local funds are being allocated. I think the county treasurers certainly do. But where there's a unique opportunity that I believe that I will do as the next treasurer is when there are irregularities or variabilities, or someone is drawing funds out of the local government investment pool, or frankly requesting for an advance on state aid. We had an instance last year where a school district asked for more funds, but prior to the 3-time-a-year distribution for public school funding. Turns out that school district didn't have a CFO, didn't have a director of finance. And the treasurer can serve as a convener, can be that investigator to figure out if there are some irregularities. And that is something I have experience doing, of building teams, building coalitions, inquiring, asking questions, and frankly, trying to resolve those issues, sometimes in public, but sometimes also behind the scenes. And I believe that is something that I will be able to bring as Arizona's next treasurer.
Voters have certainly been subjected to, in part because they want to see more work done to take care of fraud and abuse. We saw that at the federal level with DOGE, but there are also concerns at times that some voters believe that it's rhetoric. It's fraud and abuse. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to take care of fraud and abuse. So I want to ask a two-part question. How much of a concern do you think that should be for the state treasurer's office? You mentioned auditor generals and whatnot. How much would you as state treasurer be looking into fraud and abuse? And to be frank, how much, no one wants there to be any, so I make that very clear. But do you think that that is an actual problem right now? Yes, I'm sure there are examples, but do you think it's something that is really affecting investments that are made? Do you think they're affecting Arizona citizens?
Yeah, well, I think this goes back to my earlier point about the role of the treasurer to serve as an education and sort of helping to equip our local communities. I think many of our listeners might be familiar what happened in Santa Cruz, where the Santa Cruz County treasurer embezzled, I believe, about $37 million over about 17 or 18 years. That individual centralized all decision-making under her own personal control. She earned the trust of her team, and she was able to take education funds and public safety funds and direct them to buying personal property and cars and other things. That is really important. I think that the role in my conversations with other county treasurers, they're like, that is a role that you can play, because as the state treasurer, you don't have insight all the way down to that local level. That's really the role of the auditor general. But what I can do is make sure that those communities understand there are required checks and balances. The person who issues the check is not the one who signs the check and is not the one who then deploys the check. You need to make sure that you have multiple people that are in place in order to effectively lead and ultimately steward taxpayer funds. So that is something that I really commit to doing. I mentioned the school district situation. I spoke with a county treasurer recently, and she was saying, Catherine, the reason why we have the local government investment pools and counties are investing alongside is that you're getting a good rate of return, but I can pull those funds in a case of an emergency. And she described an instance where they had a sinkhole and they needed to draw out $20 million to be able to address that sinkhole. That was life and death for that particular community. But as treasurer, if that happens, I hope that I'm on the phone saying, what's going on? What's happening? How can we address this issue? Okay, this is a crisis. You have the resources. Let's get those out the door. But I do think that being vigilant, being able to ensure that we are keeping accounting of how the dollars are coming in each day, how they're being invested, and being able to, really making sure that we have a direct accounting of where our funds are. Again, like making sure that we're doing that in-house and that we're not contracting it out, I think is just really, really important, and being a good steward on behalf of Arizonans.
Back to one kind of investment, and this may be contrary to a conservative approach, but obviously cryptocurrency has been in the news for the last few years. What are your feelings about those sorts of investments when it comes to a state treasurer and the people who would work for your office?
I think crypto is really interesting, and there's been lots of conversation. Even Congress is getting in action. There was a Senate bill, the Clarity Act, where they are trying to figure out how do we even manage cryptocurrencies, whether it's under the Security and Exchange Commission or the Commodities Future Trading Commission. There's this back and forth. What do we control? It's pretty volatile. When you look at its peak in the last year, in October of last year, it was valued at about 120. Today, it's about $72,000. And so, I mean, big numbers, but that kind of volatility for our state portfolio gives me a little pause. Because again, it goes back to protecting the principal. It's about ensuring liquidity so we can pay our bills. And then it's about making sure we get a good return. But I go back to the bill paying. Like at the end of the day, you think of the treasurer as being that bank. You need to be able to take the funds out of the checking account so that you can pay your bills. And if we're making a big bet or we're taking a risky decision or we're chasing high yield returns, we might not have the funds to pay our bills. And I should note that just a little bit different from my opponent, he was the Arizona GOP treasurer, and during his time, they did not pay their bills on time. The FEC, or the Federal Elections Commission, said, "Hey, you're not following your reports on time," and then ultimately threatened them with an audit, a federal audit. And they claimed it was a cash flow issue, and that to me is, if we have a cash flow issue, that means our legislature goes to taxpayers and says, "We're raising your taxes." We don't have anyone that can write a single check to bail out a state party. It means that taxes are raised, and that I don't think any of us want to have our increased taxes. I think all of us are feeling the pinch, and it just, yeah. So I appreciate cryptocurrency, and what one chooses to do on his or her own is awesome. But for a state portfolio, it gives me great pause and not something that I would be pursuing.
We just have a couple of minutes left before your closing statement. So I want to ask you a little bit about political philosophy, because in the primary, Republican voters and then independents in Arizona who request a Republican ballot will be thinking about not only your competence, but maybe how you approach things. So the fact that you worked for Speaker Boehner, who obviously had an accomplished career, but we've seen the Republican Party to some extent change. And we have a little bit of philosophical differences in that some people refer to people like Speaker Boehner as, oh, those are, people who are in the swamp. We need to get rid of those people. Can't have these lifetime people who keep running for office over and over again. So I wanted to ask, there was one of the debates I co-moderated, had a candidate who talked about how he was a Ronald Reagan conservative. I don't want to lump you in with one or the other, but when you look at the philosophies of Republican voters these days, certainly your opponent, you may agree on a lot of things, but certainly your approach seems different. Is there a way you'd characterize yourself as a lifelong Republican, as you said you were? Are there certain philosophies that you believe in, that you've believed in for decades, that maybe some other folks running for office don't quite share?
Yeah, well, my philosophy is actually informed by my faith. My Christian faith is sort of what my get up and why I care about the things that I do. It's what gives me the passion to care for the least, the lost, and the oppressed. Like those, like that is what gives me. I think that's why I loved working on Capitol Hill. It's why I loved working in philanthropy and now helping organizations, being those little platoons that helping neighbor to really gain the strength that they need to flourish in our societies. So my faith is what grounds me and is what is my motivation. But out of that, I do believe in a conservative approach to government. I do not believe that government is the solution for all things. I do believe we should create incentives so that you and I can really be the hands and feet in our communities. That said, I also am probably less populistic. I'm a slower to change individual, and I do not believe that the whims of perhaps even the minority or even the majority should always be implemented. And so as a result of that, I might be a slower to move. But I am also a fact gatherer. I like to gather the facts and figure out how a policy is going to implement and frankly, the trade-offs that occur. I also believe that at the end of the day, the role of the treasurer is about implementing the Constitution. It's very narrowly defined. And so trying to grab other departments and agencies and put them under my fiefdom, that again, I'm slow to change, and I also believed in a more constrained government. So I also believe that at the end of the day, my hope as a Republican, we have Republicans that are elected up and down the ticket, and I have the joy and honor of being able to work with them. That said, I also know that voters may have a different perspective. And I have a long track record of building consensus and getting things done with the goal of always serving my constituents. In this case, it would be Arizona.
Thank you, Catherine. We've reached that point where you get 90 seconds for a closing statement.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Clean Elections and to Steve, and frankly, you listeners and voters for joining us today. I hope you've heard one thing really clear. I care deeply about Arizona. I care deeply about our future. And frankly, I care about all of you who call this wonderful place home. This race comes down to judgment, trust, and stewardship. I believe in wise stewardship. I believe that every single day should be about just Doge Day. Every day is looking for those irregularities and making sure that we are investing wisely on behalf of you. It's also about limited and efficient government and making sure that we are wisely investing on behalf of you. Because if we're making big bets and we're sending our portfolio out to the highest bidder, it means that we are gambling with our taxpayer dollars and putting politics and profit ahead of protecting your funds. My opponent is 36 years old, and he has built a successful business selling extended car warranties. I believe that my experience is different. I have had the experience of managing both public and private dollars, and I believe that my business experience helps me to ensure that I will be a good steward on behalf of Arizona. My life and my career have prepared me for this job. I have the qualifications, the character, and the conservative principles to serve as Arizona's and serve us well. Again, with wise stewardship, efficient government, lower taxes, and personal responsibility, my intent is to serve our state and to do so well. I'd be honored to have our voters' endorsement by voting for us between now and July 21. If you want to learn more about us, you can at CatherineHaley4AZ.com. Thank you all so much for being with us. What an honor.
Catherine Haley is running for the Republican nomination for State Treasurer of Arizona. Early voting has already started. Election day is July 21st. Thank you all for watching. And Catherine, thank you very much for your time tonight. It was great to talk with you.
Thank you all.